Hi, I'm Doug Draper with Acme Distribution and the Denver Transportation Club, and I'm pleased to present our series, Supply Chain Logistics, the Storytellers. This series is brought to you by CAP Logistics. CAP Logistics are experts in customized transportation solutions for every need. So please visit caplogistics.com today. So today's topic is related to full truckload and shipping trends specific to pricing. And we have an expert with us, a great storyteller, Evan. And Evan, tell us a little bit about yourself, introduce yourself, and let's kind of start there. We always like to get to know our storyteller.
Yeah, sure. Great. First of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm very, very excited to be here. So I actually work for the aforementioned CAP Logistics.
All right.
So my history, my entire career has been in transportation. So went to the University of Wisconsin, actually studied economics, and kind of randomly fell into transportation. Worked in Chicago for 8 or 9 years at a very large transportation company doing a little bit of everything. And it was really great because that company did a little bit of everything. So a very large truckload brokerage. They also ran assets, right? Full truckload, trucks and trailers and all that. So we got the asset-based perspective as well. A supply chain management company, which is a very big thing in transportation these days, kind of offloading logistics work, right, from large shippers and kind of using technology to do so. And so got some great experience there, as well as some intermodal, and whatnot. So moved out to Denver here a couple of years ago, taking that large Chicago kind of freight mentality and bringing it here to CAP Logistics. And so it's been really, really interesting to take that Chicago methodology and bring it to a new area and apply kind of all that knowledge and skill set and expertise.
Yeah, that's terrific. Yeah.
So CAP focused, traditionally in the air freight sector, and so we're getting more and more into truckload, and I'm excited to talk to you today about truckload pricing and rates and all that.
That's great. It's kind of a topic that always seems to come up regardless of the year, but we'll figure out some of the trends and, what the heck are we going to do about it as we come up. So one thing we like to do on the Storytellers is talk a little bit about kind of the past and what does it mean when we talk about trends and full pricing trends. So maybe take us back to 2018 and kind of talk about what happened in 18 related to pricing trends and full truckload specifically.
Yeah, absolutely. 2018 has been just a crazy year. And depending on your perspective, either crazy good or crazy bad, right? So for shippers and those paying for transportation, it's been a really bad year. And we can explain why. Pricing has just been insane. But on the asset-based trucking end, as well as the third-party logistics company end, where CAP happens to be, it's been absolutely fantastic. So, there's a mismatch there. And so CAP and other companies really try to work hard to kind of square that mismatch and kind of minimize it. But frankly, it's been a carrier's market, right? And so 2018, pricing has jumped and jumps, dramatically. So we use a third-party data source called Cass Freight Index.
Okay.
And so they take, I don't know, however many billions and billions of dollars that they do freight payment and audit for, and kind of aggregate the data. And it's a really good source where you can get some real data on what's going on, kind of on a macro level, for pricing trends. And Cass's most recent report has stated that expenditures were up 19.3% year over year. With volume up 8.2% year over year as well.
So when you say expenditures, you're talking about just the hard dollars we spent.
Yeah, hard dollars on freight. So for those shippers that are paying transportation costs, there's been a little bit of sticker shock.
Yeah.
It's been really, really, really expensive. And I remember back to my Chicago days that moved, a couple $100 million of full truckload. This is the market that we would dream for, right? This is when transportation companies are printing money. Everything is working in their favor. They control the pricing. And that's a very, very good thing for those transportation companies. But again, there's a mismatch for those shippers and ultimately for the consumer, right? where almost everything you kind of buy, touch, see, feel has been on a truck at some point.
Yeah.
Whether it came from China, it was manufactured here in Colorado, it's at least going to be on a truck, more than likely at least one time. So unfortunately, a lot of those price increases are being felt by consumers in different ways, kind of all throughout the supply chain.
Yeah, 20% is insane if you think about it. You hear a lot of statistics and things of 4% here, 5% could be substantial, but 19 is pretty crazy. So what are a couple of the trends that happened in 2018 that caused that? Obviously, driving down the street as a consumer, I'm looking at the gas prices and I'm like, gas is not really that much more expensive than it was a year ago. So what are some other things that are the average consumer may not realize that's causing 2018 to really shoot up to that 20%?
Yeah, sure. In addition to whatever gas prices do, there's some building blocks of kind of transportation pricing. So a very large one is what's going on in the economy, right? When the economy is doing well, people are manufacturing more things, people are shipping more things, customers are and consumers are buying more things. So that increases the amount of freight that's available out there. So in addition to the economy and manufacturing, there's all sorts of different reasons why that freight demand has been at record levels. Think about kind of e-commerce and, the Amazon effect. So even though, your Amazon package doesn't get delivered in a full truckload, it does at some point potentially go on a truck, right, further up on the supply chain, and also just soaks capacity out of the market. So really that capacity, supply and demand imbalance is the real reason that expenditures have gone way, way up. There's some lower or lesser factors, congestion, right? This came up a lot when we were talking about an infrastructure bill, productivity with the ELD mandate and hours of service and all different things. All of these is kind of the perfect storm of rising costs. And really to kind of boil it down, it really just boils down to supply and demand, right? So the supply of equipment, right, and the supply of freight, and you can kind of look at it from either perspective. But we look at something called load to truck ratios.
Okay.
So how many loads are available for each given truck out there in the marketplace, and they've been at record levels throughout 2018.
Yeah, I was two things that come to mind. One is regulatory, which you mentioned, the ELD, electronic log devices, which is tracking how long a driver is on the road, and that's all regulated by the government. And there's no more fudging logs anymore because it's all electronic, so that truly has an impact.
Yeah, and real quick, I'm sorry to interrupt, but that ELD has caused some follow-on effects that people didn't really think about. So not only do drivers have to kind of play by the books, but it really decreases productivity that a driver can do or a truck can do in any given day, week, month, or year. I mean, I'll give you a real-life example. We have a customer that ships from Houston, Texas, to a small city outside Kansas City. And before the ELD mandate, that was a one-day point. The driver could do it overnight, but now with ELDs and the decreased productivity for a couple of reasons, that turns into a two-day point. So that gets more expensive on the shipper, right? The truck's being tied for 2 days. The driver can make less money. The carrier can make less money, and everyone is just less efficient and less productive, and that obviously impacts the expenditures.
Yeah, for sure. That's a great example. And then the other piece is the driver shortage. And I know we've talked about it on other episodes, but we can't underscore how real that is, right? I was saying that my kids are in high school, and I say, well, do you have any interest in being a truck driver? And I would think most people would say no. And you have the aging workforce, and there's not a whole lot coming. So the supply and demand literally for a human being behind a truck is real. Yeah,
so according to the American Transportation Association, there's a driver shortage of about 50,000 truck drivers today. And so maybe that seems like a large number, maybe it doesn't, but carriers have been trying to recruit and retain as many drivers as they can for a couple of years now, and there's still 50,000 open jobs. And Doug, to your point, you've got kind of the perfect storm there. You've got that makes it tough to recruit and retain drivers. A lot of carriers are seeing turnover of 100% sometimes, which is absolutely terrible. So you have the workforce that's aging, so a lot of truck truck drivers are getting older, right, and retiring, coming off the road. You have younger people who do not want to, jump in a truck. It's a really, really tough lifestyle.
Yeah.
You also have this threat of, technology coming. So who wants to go join and have a career that may not be around in, it's arguably how many years it'll take, but at some point potentially might be automated.
Yeah.
So a lot of different things that are kind of causing that supply and demand imbalance within trucking. And a lot of people don't know how many truck drivers there are. 1 in 16 jobs in America are truck drivers. Being a truck driver is the #1 job in 29 states. I think there's about 7.5 million truck drivers out there on the road today, and we need, again, about 50,000 more literally today.
Yeah. Yeah. It was that generation that's retiring now, being a truck driver was a career, and now it's almost like a job, which goes into the turnover that you spoke about.
Absolutely.
So we talked a little bit about what the heck happened in 2018. So let's talk about what we're doing now as far as maybe some trends and tools that people are using to work, solve the problem, if you will, of the driver shortages and the increase in transportation. So let's talk specifically about some technologies that are out there that people and shippers are using to help offset some of those increases.
Yeah, for sure. So transportation and trucking in general traditionally kind of lags behind the times. There's a lot of industries that have, technology and automation and disruption. But again, traditionally trucking is a little bit slow to the punch to really kind of implement technology. It's a very kind of backwards industry in a number of different ways. But people are catching on that, hey, there's a lot of opportunity here to come in and disrupt trucking. You see that in a lot of different ways. A lot of new startups coming in and taking an outsider's perspective to trucking. A lot of companies that have traditionally been just doing trucking the old-fashioned way are starting to leverage technology to kind of cut away and eat away at some of those inefficiencies. And then you have just pure tech companies, right, really coming in and trying to see, well, how can computers really come in and disrupt, what's been going on in the industry.
Yeah.
So I was at a conference a couple weeks ago now in Dallas, and J.B. Hunt is a very large trucking company, asset-based carrier. They also have a brokerage. They said they did $150 million in digital brokerage. So out of their $450 million in brokerage, and brokerage is just matching up a freight available shipment, right, with an available truck, a full third of that was done through their app. Right?
Wow.
And that's just a crazy number. When it kind of came out of nowhere, they were saying, for them, and that's kind of, if you build it, they will come type of thing, where it's really kind of skyrocketed for them.
So when you say digital, that's what you mean. It would be a driver with just downloading an app on his phone, and the interface and interaction is on their phone.
Yeah, exactly. So, we used to, in the brokerage industry, call it dialing for diesel, right? So you have customers that have shipments that need to move, and presumably there's trucks out there that are available to move the freight, and you would have to call a lot of times, right? Back in Chicago, I think it would on average take us 25 or 30 phone calls to book a shipment, sometimes 80, 90 phone calls, and obviously sometimes you get lucky. But technology can be really, really smart about cutting out those phone calls. They're very, very expensive. Obviously, people are very, very expensive. And if you start talking about big data and analytics and predictive technology to match up that available shipment with that available load, there's a lot of different ways that technology can do that better than even a very, very skilled human being.
Yeah. And one thing that you made mention of is that there's pure tech companies that are coming into trucking. Like you said, you never think about that. And then there's some groups coming in that have nothing to do with, it's all technology. They don't no experience, but understand the power that you just described of bringing technology into there. It's pretty impactful.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. There's been a little bit of a learning curve, it seems like, for a lot of those companies, and I'll give you an example, but they're starting to catch up. So we worked with a company that used technology to kind of do route planning, right?
Okay.
And I know that we're going to talk about that, but the computer would spit out things that just weren't possible for a human driver to do, right? It would say, hey, today you're supposed to drive from noon till 8 p.m. and then we need you to start driving again at 2 a.m. because that's the optimal time for this particular shipment. But you've got to balance out. There's a real human and a real truck, and there are different factors going on. But these tech companies, it seems like, are starting to get smarter and smarter in how they actually execute in a real world scenario. You hear a lot about the Uberization of trucking, and it's getting more real by the day, it seems like.
Yeah, you can have all the technology in the world saying, here's what you should do, but there's still a human behind that truck saying, I know this route, and I know it's always congested at this time of day. And so you almost have to trust the technology to ultimately, make it more efficient and cost effective. So we talked a little bit about the technology piece of it. Let's talk about the physical truck and the assets, because you talk about miles per gallon and how do we increase. This truck is 4.5 miles per gallon, and if we can bump it to 5.5 miles per gallon, then we can save X number of dollars. What are some things you're seeing related to enhancements to the physical vehicles and the trailers?
Yeah, so over the last few years, there have been a few trends that have matured. Aerodynamics in trucking is a big part of it. Doug, to your point, increasing those miles per gallon. A carrier that can operate at 8 miles per gallon on average versus 5 miles per gallon has a huge pricing advantage out there, an efficiency advantage. So how else can carriers go out there and really exploit those advantages? A lot of it is with new technology, so and kind of in different ways than you would think. So the electrification of trucks is coming. It's not quite real or here yet. You think about, in cars, you look at the Tesla, right? And the Tesla supercharger network. Well, there is no network like that for trucks. So I think we're a little bit further off there, but that doesn't mean that technology can't help. With the current trucks that are on the road. So while we're kind of getting more mature with that electrification, route planning is a big part of technology, using your finite resources, your driver and your truck in the most efficient way possible is really, really important. A lot of technology around safety. So, forward-facing cameras and whatnot. And now that every truck has to have an ELD, there's a lot of data being created. So carriers can actually go in and see drivers that are either braking too hard or they're speeding, which can have safety consequences as well as financial consequences. The faster a truck's going, the less miles per gallon it's going to be getting. And all this data kind of provides a trucking company or dispatcher a lot more intelligence to be able to go in and kind of optimize everything that's going on. Trucking really is kind of a game of pennies when you come down to it. If you can optimize that rate per mile, right, your expense, your true cost, and then maximize on the revenue end, what you're getting from a shipper or from a broker or a company like that. That's the game of trucking. So technology is now allowing these carriers to be a lot smarter and get more efficient in their day-to-day life.
And day-to-day life is important for the truck driver for sure. And one thing that we spoke about before is route planning. Right, if you think that there's been companies that basically say, I'm going to have a whole bunch of trucks and I'm sending them in one direction. So go from here to Kansas City, and when you're done, thank you very much, and if I have something else, I'll let you know. Well, that kind of leaves that trucker on an island, so to speak. And so there's been some companies that have said, well, we're going to take them from Denver to Kansas City, then Chicago, then St. Louis, and then back to Denver. And they plan their business around that route. And if I'm a driver and I can come back to Colorado once every 4 days, I'd be very interested in doing that loop versus just being taken out to Kansas City and then having to find a way back to Denver. So I think we talked a little bit about how route planning, makes the human enjoy the job a little bit more.
Yeah, and I think very large shippers are getting a lot smarter about that. Instead of trying to find the right trucks and drivers and trucking companies to make their supply chain work, companies are investing, and they could be investing in new facilities, right? So if there are irregular routes or that were irregular, by opening up a new distribution center or whatnot, and there's a lot of kind of consulting dollars around how best to and where best to open distribution centers or whatnot, it makes it much more attractive attractive to the driver. It decreases that average length of haul. It can make it much more cost competitive. So it may not seem, especially in the short run, to make economic sense to open up a brand new facility just to make a driver's life a little bit easier. But in a lot of cases, the ROI is going to be there, on a more longer term basis. And so a lot of, large shippers are doing that.
Yeah. It's easy to go to a CFO and say, see this 20% that we spent more this year based on the CAS. Mm-hmm. That's a pretty impactful a visual to make those route planning decisions.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we talked a little bit about how we got here in 2018 and what are people doing now to help mitigate it. Let's flip to 2019 and kind of beyond, and what are some of the trends you're seeing that are coming down the road, positive or negative on both sides as a shipper or a carrier? Talk about the trend.
Yeah, for sure. The economy, like we talked about, is the biggest driver of transportation expenses. And so general consensus seems to be there's a slowing out there, right? I'm not a doom and gloom person that the recession's right here and, rates are going to drop, but there's kind of two camps from what I've seen. You kind of have the bullish people, and the more bullish people are expecting kind of an increase of, low single digits, right? Maybe 5 to 8%, growth in trucking. And then the more bearish people are still predicting growth, but it's more staying flat, the kind of 0 to 3% growth range. So there's a lot of uncertainty out there, let's call it, right? Mm-hmm. Trade and tariffs, inflation is growing, right? Deficits, right? And the economy seems to be slowing. And so you see that supply and demand normalizing a little bit more. So I don't think that 2019 is going to be this, again, crazy record year like it was in 2018. But at the same time, the bottom isn't dropping out, the sky isn't on fire,
right?
That kind of stuff. So for the large shippers out there, that's a good thing, right? Costs are going to decrease over the record levels from 2018. Things are going to ease a little bit. Capacity is going to ease. That supply and demand is going to be more in whack. But for the carrier end, that's not necessarily a great thing, right? Yeah. Rates are going to normalize. It isn't going to be this blood in the water, let's go print some money market. Yeah. But carriers also have a lot that they can do as far as getting more efficient and productive and using technology to their advantage to maintain their margins as well.
What do you see about industry consolidation, right? Sometimes people say, well, we're going to grow by acquisition. What are your thoughts on that for 19?
Yeah, I see it continuing. There's been a lot of growth by acquisition recently, mainly because of economies of scale. Mm-hmm. I mean, there are true economies of scale in freight, and where you can really kind of pool and leverage that buying power, the more freight that you have. To move. There's also recently been a lot of private equity money.
Yeah, we were talking about that.
Yeah, getting into transportation. And private equity seems to address inefficiencies. We kind of talked about in the beginning, transportation is usually a little bit behind the times. So a lot of private equity companies are seeing there's a lot of opportunity to come in and get these companies more efficient, get smarter about pricing, stop leaving so much money on the table, and really see some growth. So I think you'll see that consolidation continue.
Yeah. So why do you think the private equities are coming into the market now? I mean, trucking's been around forever, but it just seems, and I would agree with you, that a lot of new money is kind of coming into the industry.
Yeah. So now that there's all this data in trucking, it's really how you use and leverage that data, and private equity is just great at that, right? Again, looking and finding those inefficiencies and using data to exploit them. So those customers and those companies, that can go in and really use that data to their advantage have very, very powerful tools, right? To get more efficient, to get more productive, to charge the right price, from their customers, and just a lot of opportunity to make a lot of money.
Yeah, yeah. Private and equity are not four-letter words, and they don't necessarily have to be, right? Because it's not a negative if that new money comes into the market. That's a whole nother segment we could certainly talk about.
Yeah, definitely.
But today, I think we covered a good amount about what happened in 18, what's going to happen in 19, and Really appreciate you joining us today. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Well, thank you as joining us today on the Connect and Collaborate Network featuring supply chain logistics, the Storytellers. Thank you all for listening, and hope everybody has a great day.